Epstein resurfaces, MAGA fractures, Iran now emerges. Is this a war? Is this genuine? Or is this a narrative reset? We have the Epstein files and sort of circulating in the media, and then on top of that we have the potential war between the US and Iran also circulating. And when you think about it, these two stories are circulating, are vying for your attention. And so, what is going on here? What exactly is going on? One of the examples, when you look at, say, Mao Zedong, for example, his meteoric rise to power, this extraordinary rise to power, was not because of the sheer will of the man alone, although narratives often like to claim that, but rather movements collapse due not to external pressure, but internal fracture. And we see this with Mao Zedong's enemies. The fact of the matter is that he won because he made fewer mistakes. Everyone else was already fractured from within. The Kuomintang were fractured from within. The Japanese Empire was fractured from within. And so we see that oftentimes it is internal strife that undermines a movement, an empire, a government, an organization, and so on and so forth. This gets back to the point that Maître Jacques Lacan made, which is that the husband who is neurotic because he is obsessed over his wife cheating on him is neurotic, even if his wife is in fact cheating on him. This isn't a moral pass on the part of Lacan towards the wife. This is an acknowledgement of the potential inadequacies on the part of the husband and what led to this situation. Similarly, we see the same with empires and governments and movements and so on and so forth, and MAGA is no different. Conspiracy theories aside, the fact of the matter is that we have to acknowledge the fact that we see a narrative shift and that we see an awful amount of attention going away from one particular story and directed at another particular story. And so one need not invoke lunatic conspiracy theories to posit the idea that the Epstein files have in a way been used to distract from the current oncoming potential war between the US and Iran, a war which, by the way, would be terrible for Americans and Iranians alike. So the opposing view on the matter is that conflict between the US and Iran is inevitable and so on and so forth, and that global sort of shifts or whatever do not revolve around presidential scandals, and indeed that is definitely true. I would say that the current sort of animosity between the US and Iran was inevitable, more or less. However, that is also not to say that things are not used at opportune times, that at times people will take advantage of certain things in order to move towards a certain aim. The fact of the matter is that we have in political theory what's known as the flag effect, which is that the moment there is the perception of an external enemy, everyone rallies together and more or less unifies under the ruling administration. For example, the short German man perhaps did Joseph Stalin the biggest favor he had ever been handed, because he solidified Stalin's power in many ways, when you think about it. This is also true for the Bolsheviks early on. when the White Army decided to invade. Again, this solidified the power of Leon Trotsky and so on and so forth, because it created the perception of an external foreign enemy. Again, this is called the flag effect, a well-known phenomenon. And so getting people to recognize an external enemy is very powerful, and it often helps in whatever cause it is that you are championed. If external conflict brings stability to domestic matters, then this is a very dangerous precedent. Again, to use the Stalin example, Mustache Man did exactly that for Stalin. He essentially handed him the stability and so on and so forth that he needed in order to be able to secure his reign. His reign, before the German guy decided to do what he did, was more or less tenuous at best. He was facing a lot of opposition and had more or less degraded the workers' state to be not very fit for the goal of spreading sort of socialism worldwide. And so when he was faced with the Eastern Front War, this gave him all of the ammunition he needed in order to be able to secure his supremacy. And so, while useful in a dictatorship, although granted inhumane, this is dangerous for democracy. For any democracy to have this as a precedent is incredibly dangerous, not to mention cold and callous with regards to the lives that will be lost and shattered as a result of this. The reality is that politics is essentially information warfare. That's what it is. It's a war for your attention. A crisis is a gravity well, when you think about it, kind of akin to the event horizon of a black hole. This is an existential crisis. This goes beyond mere pandering and mere sycophancy and so on and so forth. And that is the danger of using conflict and crises to secure your place within a democracy, is it can very well cost you the very democracy that you claim to prize. Strength isn't distraction, it's transparency. If transparency breaks your movement, if asking questions breaks your movement, then perhaps you need to be asking better questions.